Can you raise male chicks to be kind roosters? Or do they all end up a little bit feisty? Hey, buddy, don't do it. I know you don't like boots. And we are just getting into the chick season now, so I figure this is the perfect time to talk about what you can expect when you raise a cockerel. And for those of you new to chickens, cockerel is simply the word for a male chick or a baby rooster, whereas the word pullet describes a female chick or a baby hen. So first I want to talk about whether all cockerels will become aggressive at some point or not. And then I'm going to talk about the claim that many people in the backyard chicken world make, which is that you should not interact with your cockerels. You should completely ignore them because otherwise they will grow up to be aggressive as adults. And I'll give you a little spoiler here. That claim is not 100% a myth, but it does show a huge misunderstanding of rooster behavior. We'll get into that. And then lastly, I'm going to talk about what you can do if your young rooster becomes aggressive and how you can even turn him into a cuddler if that's your thing. So one of my audience members, Natalia, asked me this question. Will all young cockerels eventually challenge humans? The answer is no. Many roosters will never become aggressive. And actually the majority of roosters that I've raised and come into contact with have not been aggressive. Not ever. And so if you are raising a cockerel or 2 or 3 or 10, don't expect you're gonna have a problem. So that means that you could snuggle the heck out of your male chicks or you could totally ignore them. And either way, they grow up to be perfect gentlemen. Hi, handsome. But what about the exceptions to that? And I want to go back to Natalia's email for this. She wrote to me about cockerels. I know a lot of people say not to handle them, just ignore them when they're young, so they respect your space. Is that really the best way of making them kind? So let's revisit this claim that all of us have heard out there, and maybe even some of us have made this claim ourselves. If you love on your male chicks, they'll grow up to be aggressive as adults. Myth or fact? So the truth is, when you have a really close relationship with a male chick, once he starts maturing, he may become aggressive. And yes, I'm putting that in quotes. These quotes are very important because I'm going to argue that aggressive is more often than not a misinterpretation of his behavior. And I can already see the look on some of your faces. I can see the eye rolls, but hear me out because I am going to approach this from scientific research that's been done on chicken behavior. But first, I want to start by asking you a question. Have you ever raised a puppy? Or have you ever spent time around somebody else's puppy? It's very likely that you've answered yes to at least one of those questions, so I want you just to close your eyes for a minute now and think back to that time. Do you remember the puppy biting phase? That's question 1. Question 2, do you remember your dog jumping on you because he was happy or excited? And question 3, did he ever hump you or, God forbid, other people? For most of us, the answer to these questions is yes, especially if you've had a male dog. Fergus, I'm looking at you. But we recognize that all of these things are age-appropriate behaviors for puppies. And that doesn't mean that we just sit around and let them do these things. No, we stop them, we redirect them, we train them. But we do understand that the intention behind these behaviors is pretty innocent. But for some reason, we do not extend that courtesy to our roosters. And roosters are also very social creatures who play, and like our puppy biters, can play too roughly. Roosters can also experience really big feelings of excitement and jump on us like our puppies do. We get mammals. So when our puppies do these things, we understand why, but we don't get birds. And when our roosters do these things, it feels mean, it feels hateful, but that doesn't mean that that's their intention. And roosters are highly sexual animals. If you've ever been around a rooster, you know they mate dozens of times a day. they would put our best playboys to shame. And this sexual behavior really starts to ramp up around 6 weeks of age, because at about 6 weeks of age, a rooster's testosterone levels really start to rise. And in nature, male chicks actually attempt to engage in sexual behavior with their mama hens at this time. And they're not even sexually mature yet at this age. That doesn't actually happen until they're about 4 months old. But at about 6 weeks, they just start to engage in this kind of sexual play. And what happens is a little cockerel will jump on the back of the mama hen, and then he will bite the feathers on the back of her neck and tread his feet, because that's very common for balance in mating. And then he'll actually bring his vent down the exact same way he would if he were actually mating. But if he were actually mating, then his vent would touch the hen's vent, but he is way too small for that. So his vent can only really just tap her back. And this is the puppy hump. It's like when a puppy is too young to actually mate, but he still just kind of goes through the motions. So let's think about this in your scenario now. If you have a really good relationship with your male chick, you give him a lot of attention, then he might attempt these sexual advances on you at about 6 weeks of age. But unlike the puppy hump, it can hurt. He leaps at you, he bites you, he puts his claws into you, and it can feel really aggressive. But it's just the puppy hump. How many times have I said puppy hump in this video? And this is also true when roosters reach sexual maturity at around 4 months of age. What can seem like an attack is actually a sexual invitation. And this is also why sometimes when you're visiting with your hens and you're leaning over with them, a rooster might come up behind you and bite you or jump on you. You're scrubbing. You got me, you little f***er. And if you're bent over like that, he might even see that as a sexual invitation from you, because hens do squat down like that when they are asking a rooster to mate. And that means what feels like a vicious attack isn't necessarily so. But what should you do if your cockerel starts trying it on with you? First of all, don't get mad at him. Don't be mean to him. He won't understand that. And he might view that as you being aggressive to him, which could make him react accordingly. But you do want to discourage this behavior as soon as it shows up. It is much easier to nip this in the bud with a 6-week-old than it is with a 4-month-old. And the good news is these behaviors aren't typically a surprise. Your male chicks will approach you in a certain way. They will tend to look at you straight on, very intense. They might even hackle out those neck feathers a bit. Those are their tells. They will tend to do that before engaging with you. And once you see your rooster do this once, you will recognize those tells forevermore. And so you'll always have that little bit of warning. And then you do what mama hens in the wild do. Mama hens do not allow their male chicks to mount them. They do allow 6-week-old female chicks to crawl all over them, but when their male chicks approach them that way, they will either get up and move, or, and I love this, they give them the evil eye. That mama hen will stare that little punk down, and that's often enough for him to just back off and leave her be. And if you want to take that approach, you're going to have to get kind of down at your rooster's level so you can kind of square off to him and give him that intense eye contact. But it is a great way to prevent this sexual behavior. The other thing you can do, and this comes from dog training, and that's that you can redirect his behavior to a different activity. So what you'll want to do is always have a feeder nearby when he's around this age. And then when he kind of comes at you with that intent and has those tells that we talked about, you would just put some feed in your hand and start tidbitting. Chicks love to eat out of your hand, and especially if you can attract some other chicks with that tidbitting noise and they come up and start eating out of your hand, your cockerel is very likely to join them because they are very social. And if none of these things work and it is getting really bad, there is another approach you can try. And this is another dog training approach. And basically you will need to temporarily separate your rooster when he starts behaving in a way that you don't like. So if your cockerel is getting too feisty with you, you would just pick him up and put him in a cage. And I love a dog cage for this because then you can still keep him with the flock and he still feels like he's with everybody, but it's just a little time out. And then after a short time, you would take him back out of the cage, you would hold him until he's very calm, and then you would put him back on the ground. And if he gets feisty with you again, you just put him back in the cage. I hope you can see just how much more complex roosters are than we tend to give them credit for, and that just because something feels aggressive to you doesn't mean that your rooster is intending it that way. And I don't want to paint this rosy picture that roosters are never aggressive, because they definitely can be. And if your rooster is actually intending to be aggressive and you're not just misinterpreting it, then you need to work on your relationship with that rooster. I work with aggressive roosters using positive dog training methods. And so if you need some help with that, if you need help working with your aggressive rooster, then be sure to check out my blog article on that, where I detail exactly what I do. I will link to that below. But treat your male chicks the same way you treat your female chicks. Love on them, connect with them. You probably won't have any problems with their behavior, but if you do, then just like with the puppy, you can work with them to change that behavior. And if you're new to chickens this year, you will definitely want to check out my Pay What You Want video course on raising chicks. It's called Mama Hen's Guide to Raising Spoiled Rotten Chicks. I will link to that below as well. And if you're thinking about getting more than one rooster for your flock, make sure you check out this video on how to raise multiple roosters together, because you really can have bloodshed and even death if you don't know what you're doing. So make sure to check out that video.